Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the RealComm, the Building Internet of Things BIoT Case Studies from the Edge webinar. My name is Laura Atala, and I'm the Manager of Webinars and Program here at RealComm. We have a great presentation set up for you today, and we'll get started in just a few minutes, but before we do, we have a short video that we'd like to share with you. So be sure to turn up the volume on your computer and keep that little audio broadcast window that you see on your screen open, just to be able to be sure to fully experience the sound on both the video and the presentation today. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll begin the webinar shortly. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the RealComm, the Building Internet of Things BIoT Case Studies from the Edge webinar. My name is Laura Atala, and I'm the Manager of Webinars and Program for RealComm. We've got a great lineup of information and presenters for you today, and we're so glad that you joined us for this conversation. As we begin, I'd like to start by introducing you to the moderator for today's event, Tom Shercliffe. Tom is co-founder, along with Rob Murchison, of Intelligent Buildings, LLC. Intelligent Buildings is a smart building services company that has consulted on over $1 billion in new development and has customers with over 1 billion existing square feet. They have areas of focus that include IoT integration, building analytics, and building cybersecurity. So with that, thanks so much for joining us today, Tom, and I'd like to go ahead and turn the reins over to you.
Thank you, Laura. As she mentioned earlier, don't close that little window. You might lose the audio. And if you need any assistance, Dan Devine, whose email is up there, can help you at the bottom. Also, during the webinar, we'll have in the lower right-hand portion of your screen, you can submit questions at any time along the way. And if we don't get to them during the webinar, we will get to you afterwards. You can email me, tom@intelligentbuildings.com, or you'll get everybody's email when you get the materials after the webinar. Really importantly, we want to thank our sponsors. We work with and know these folks and in the industry, and we encourage you to get to know them too. And if I could just make a note about each of them, Building IQ helps building owners and operators worldwide lower energy use, increase building operations efficiency, and improve tenant comfort. Intel provides OEMs, ODMs, SIs, and SIs a path to industry-class solutions by offering a broad set of hardware and software products, as well as application-ready platforms for smart buildings. Cisco, their hardware, software, and service offerings are used to create the Internet solutions that make networks possible, providing easy access to information anywhere at any time, including buildings. And for Lucid, organizations use Lucid's Building OS and data analytics platform to optimize the performance of their buildings and teams. And to our silver sponsors, CommScope designs and builds the connectivity for the world's most advanced networks. And finally, ESD brings together consultants, designers, project managers, and integration specialists to provide one-stop team-based solutions to your intelligent buildings challenges. Thank you to our sponsors. This is just a quick perspective on where we are when we talk about the building Internet of Things. I mean, we all know in the past, going from pneumatics to digital controls or DDC, building automation, building management systems, BAS, BMS, a really big leap there. And then approximately over the past 10 years, we've been in what some might call the smart building phase, which was smart, connected, high performance, sustainability got involved. Really, we were doing things like integration and interoperability. Niagara kind of came into its heyday, and others allowing different systems to talk to each other. That created experiences and energy efficiency and so forth. But what we found along the way there was that all of those control systems that were being connected were computer-based or local area network-based, and they also had remote access to the Internet. So we really started getting into this, question of the Internet protocol and IP, and as kind of a bridge, we had protocols like BACnet and LAN and Modbus and these other things that were kind of the universal protocol and connectivity of their discipline or of their control system. But there was always the question, can we just connect it to the network? Are we really there yet with the Internet view of things? And I think you'll find after today that we really are. We have 1 foot squarely planted in that green circle, and while it does say future, I think you're going to see that there's a lot of that going on right now. The first portion of the session today, I'll say casually, is our real estate guys. And what we wanted to do is get them involved early so that we could really set a tone and to some extent a definition of what it really means in a real estate environment. And then the second portion will be the solutions and the things that you would actually do to participate in the building Internet of Things. Scott and Michael are folks that design, build, manage, buy, and sell real estate. And I think you're going to really appreciate this perspective to set the tone. So even though they both have presentations, I wanted to say just get them to answer a quick question at the beginning here so we can get some level setting. And I'm going to start with Scott, who, if I've got this right, Scott's done 90 properties and 13 million square feet all in downtown Detroit with this kind of a vision of the Internet of Things. Kind of, if you could kind of start not fresh, because there are a lot of rehabilitated buildings or renovated, but if you could start with a vision and really tear through this at scale, this is something that they did. So Scott, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little bit more about your background and role, but more importantly, if you could just answer, what is the building Internet of Things to Bedrock and you? What is it?
Sure, for sure. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate being a part of this webinar. And as you mentioned, my role at Bedrock as project executive, I actually err on the side of construction. So I come from the physical redevelopment of properties, both on an acquisition side and then what can this property be, and then the execution of that property. And so as you have it, and I'll get to it a little more in my presentation, we've had a heck of a buying spree and a fixing spree, if you will, in the downtown Detroit. And what that has given us the ability to do is really take a look at our portfolio and really push the envelope from an IoT perspective. So, while my background is physical construction, I really end up being kind of the technology deployment group that gets in the buildings first and sets the foundation for good success for us long term as far as maintenance and operation. And what the IoT concept really means to us as a building manager or property manager is really the ability to connect what we have today. So, as you went into your presentation, and you called it past or present, but that's, BMS systems, and that's building systems and how they operate. So our vision is to connect those systems and then also create a network that's able to connect whatever's coming in the future, because as you know, I can't crystal ball what will be 5 years from now, but we want to try to fix up our buildings and set them up for success long term. So that's what really the IoT strategy for us means.
So connecting what you have and know now, but also planning for and having infrastructure for the things that will come along the way. For
sure.
Okay, great. And I know you're going to have a presentation in just a second, but I'd like to get Michael involved, who's the SVP and CIO and CTO of Taubman. And Michael, your background was in IT management and consulting, and now CIO, CTO. If you could just tell a little bit more of your background and what does it mean, the building IoT, to you and Taubman? What is it?
Yeah, well, Taubman is a premier owner-operator of shopping centers in North America. We'll open our third one in the last year in Asia next month. And, for us, we're serving a clientele, if you will, that's being rapidly disrupted by e-commerce, changes in shopping habits, those kind of things. For us, the Internet of Things did some very interesting things in terms of sustainability and energy savings and management. But really what it gave us was this complete sort of integrated infrastructure that gives us the flexibility now to quickly deploy new services and new offerings for shoppers, retailers, and for ourselves. A good example is, we created this sort of industry-leading Santa's Flight Academy this past year, which is a great interactive, virtual reality, augmented reality experience for children. And, we knew going into it that we had already in place all the connectivity, all the bandwidth, all the, wireless and everything we needed to support that. So now anytime I need to do something new in one of my properties, one of the planning assumptions is that the underlying technology is there for us just to plug into. It's kind of the, we refer to it as, sort of the, the idea that just keeps on giving, because we find more and more uses for it all the time. So.
Oh, fantastic. That's so. I wanted to get a little bit practical. Again, having real estate folks right up front say, this is not Star Wars. This is something that you're building and working with every day. And Scott, I'll let you go in and just tell a little bit more about what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Tom. And I'll try to be brief. And by all means, feel free to ask questions to the panel, or those that are participating and so on. But as I dove in a little bit earlier, Bedrock Detroit is a full-service real estate group, and I think you'll find there's a great complement between what we do and what Michael does, and you'll get kind of both sides of the spectrum. When I say full service, we have properties in the predominantly office, residential, parking actually, and in the retail space, but very little retail compared to Michael's groups. But anyway, full service property manager, meaning we procure properties, we make them right, and then we fill them with our tenants, and basically perform the day-to-day operations for them. So Bedrock Detroit started really 2011. First property was purchased then, and believe it or not, in the last 5 years, or what that is now, I guess we're more than 5, 6, 7 years, we sit on over 90 properties. Very early, apologize, hold on 1 minute, sorry. Early in our procurement of properties, we realized that it was really important that we basically create a consistent building system to be able to manage more efficiently our properties. And so it was really driven on to create a tenant experience that was second to none. So basically today, starting with that concept, today we sit on about 10 million square foot of our 13, 14 million square foot portfolio that is integrated in some way, shape, or form in systems that include obviously BMS systems, but also cameras, card access control, parking technology, believe it or not, tying parking, and we're starting to dabble and have conversations in how to connect vehicle to building and make that experience second to none. So like Michael mentioned, really integration provides that backbone and baseline to be able to expand into whatever the future might hold. So today, again, sit on 10 million square foot of property that's integrated. This kind of gives you a quick representation. Sorry, it's a bit small, but gives you a snapshot of our properties. And believe it or not, it's really about 1.5 miles by 1.5 miles. So some could consider us a smart city in addition to really a smart building portfolio. And we also have 3 or 4 properties in Cleveland that are also connected to the same system. But so anyway, this represents our portfolio. Our vision in the beginning is to create a single driver's seat to be able to real-time identify alarms and basically have communication and control to correct those alarms and issues we're having in our building. Create intuitive user displays so that our operations staff and you'll see even our tenants have the ability to see quickly and maintain and control their spaces. Basically the ability to converge all systems, no matter what the protocol, onto a single user interface. Obviously this has allotted us a lot of ability to identify costing and find ourselves driving better operation costs from a real estate perspective. And then most importantly, the vision behind our integrator IoT platform is to give our tenants space for their control, for their space. So I know it's crazy, not a lot of landlords think that way, but ultimately we want our tenants to have ultimate control and flexibility. So that was really the vision as we got started. And today, like I said, about 10 million square feet. For me, and how do you deploy the vision, it's really kind of, as we started out down the road of IoT, and it was really heavily focused on BMS and BAS systems, so building systems, it quickly translated into, well, if I'm connecting those systems, why not everything else in my building? So today, the core and the start point for us to deploy our vision is a common network. So first thing we do in any building we go into is really run a converged network that has the ability to pick up on the building level whatever might be in that, BAS, security, parking, DAS systems, you name it. We try to make sure we're designing a network to support those systems and, like I mentioned earlier, systems that we don't know about today. And then all those report up or tie into basically a portfolio infrastructure or a brain, if you will, that ends up being a redundant data center type scenario. So an enterprise level network configuration that basically takes our 90 properties and puts them in view from a single driver's seat. So ultimately, as Tom mentioned before, we're really taking the building side of things and tying it into the IT side of things, which is really the nature of the conference. So this is really the start point. And it's taken years to kind of gravitate to this first move, but this is something we do every building we walk into and provides consistency. And then flip into just a couple of quick snapshots that we're afforded because we have the data. We start to look at integration of dashboards across our whole portfolio so our operations team can look at service tickets across the portfolio and what's going on. Can also drive into a single building, but as you can see, they start to have a consistent look so that our operations engineers can flip from building to building and what they see is very consistent and predictable. Can jump into energy dashboards across the portfolio and what are we doing today. Look at energy dashboards as far as a specific property again, and then even jump into Rocket Fiber's a specific tenant that's actually a gig ISP, and basically this is their portal into their building and their space and what's going on and their ability to control temperatures and set points and see really real time what's happening in their property, so they're ultimately controls at their fingertips. So that's kind of in a nutshell where we're at. Benefits we've seen, obviously, operational benefits. We can ultimately operate more for less, just with the ability to see everything from one location. Our energy and operations costs drastically reduced. Better environmental impact, improved security, building maintenance, et cetera. But most importantly, we provide a better experience for our tenants, and that's always the drive. So certainly open up for questions, and appreciate the time.
Good, thank you. That was very helpful. A couple questions as we're going to get Michael up here. And have you been able to draw any lines between where do you draw the line between base building? You talked about having given them access to their space and control systems, and at some point the tenant improvement allowance they do things on their own, and then of course you go all the way down the spectrum to their own office technology. Do you have a clear line there, or how's that going?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it obviously in the real estate world can be a blurred line. Ultimately, every building we have, we start with the core infrastructure, and we support the main building systems, which ultimately branch off into the tenant spaces. And then really we get into an education process almost with every tenant. Great example of recent 300,000 square foot tenant we have that, by showing them the portals we have and the controllability, they're quickly in, looking for that same piece, so we can quickly grow our network platform to pick up those spaces as well, which help me from an operations perspective, because many times my engineers in our portfolio are managing that tenant space. So it's a varying deliverable. Our preference is always to be able to see and understand what's going on in tenant space, but then again, we have some where tenant says, you know what, we have our own system and I'm not interested, and we do our best to watch the main building systems and let them have the flexibility of watching and performing the way they do. So.
All right, but because of your approach and your network-centric thinking, are there some tenants that expect that you provide connectivity for certain things that you're not ready for or surprised by? They want internet connection and local area connection for certain, whether it's tenant space control systems or even some of their technology. It's a great question. I haven't been surprised by what folks have asked for to date. I think it's more, it becomes an education of what we can tie from a building perspective. I think the tenants we see aren't ready or aren't prepared even or understand the infrastructure and the ease of deployment on how easy deployment can be, because we've started with a solid base network that can support their needs. And we're very careful to watch the lines between their business operation and their actual facility operation, and those two things are distinctly different. But in many cases, that's an education with that client. But it's been there hasn't been too many things we haven't been able to solve or make happen. Even our constant questioning of network of why aren't we storing this there, or can we put this on that, and it's a great ability and a great tool, as I'm sure Michael will get into, to be able to fall back to and provide for our tenants. Yep, great, fantastic, and I imagine it'll be interesting to hear the contrast from office and mixed use over to Michael. And Michael, if you're ready, we'll let you dive in and tell a little bit more about what you're doing in a little bit different real estate environment.
Sounds good. So we began our IoT journey about 5 years ago, at about about the time I started with Taubman, we were looking for ways to provide a new amenity to our shoppers, which was shopper Wi-Fi. It was the big new thing in 2012. And, when we started thinking about it, we reached out to a lot of different people, and we talked to a lot of folks in industry, and we came up with this idea of creating what we call the smart mall, and basically being able to use energy savings to pay for the free shopper Wi-Fi. And I mentioned in my earlier comments that this was really the it's come to be the system that just keeps on giving. We keep finding more and more uses for it. So we started looking at energy management really to pay for that new amenity. We quickly came up with other ideas, including the sort of the holy grail for technology folks, which is create new streams of revenue from our technology investments, and really providing high-speed networking to a lot of our tenants. At the time we were looking at the need to provide Wi-Fi, we were also talking to our tenants to understand really, what were the things that they liked or didn't like about the technology that was in the malls, and it was almost universal that they needed more bandwidth, and as you probably can all guess, that's gone further and faster than anyone imagined in 2012. The wiring and the four-wall infrastructure was just not very good. So we created this idea of the smart mall, which is to put in a complete new fiber optic network throughout the mall, and then use that to connect up all the different devices and things. Much like what we just saw, you can see the bottom left-hand corner of this is the dashboard that we've created using software to manage our energy. So really what was the smart mall? It's what we call the technical communications backbone. So a lot of these buildings were built in the 60s, 70s, 80s. Complete copper infrastructure, which had sort of grown over time. Tenants had come and gone. Technology had been left in the closets to the point where by 2012, a new implementation of communications for a store could take 3, 4, or 5 visits by the people trying to, find the right cable to use, pull new cable, things like that. So, as part of this, we were able to get control over that whole infrastructure and what was going on in our closets and who was going into them. And, the technical communications backbone became the key to doing that. And it's, like as I said, it's a complete fiber optic network built from scratch. And then, of course, the free shopper Wi-Fi, as I mentioned, and that gives you all sorts of opportunities, whether it's for location-based services or offers or things like that to help out the shoppers. The mall today, as we think of, we used to visualize the mall as sort of this physical place, and it's really morphed into this. It's a physical digital. As you walk through the mall, there's this whole sort of milieu of electronic services and people using their smartphones and all that. And the smart mall was designed to facilitate all that, as well as help us better manage and get control over things. You've probably heard of, some of the big breaches that have been caused by, uncontrolled access to building automation systems by vendors, where, someone would run a T1 to give a vendor access to a HVAC unit, and that would not be controlled centrally. Well, part of this was to improve that cybersecurity posture by taking and consolidating, in many cases, 8 to 10 different circuits under the one circuit that now goes in and supports this whole thing. we will eventually use this platform. I talked about the flexibility and the ability to count on what's there to transform the mall experience. So, our vision is that, eventually the mall becomes a different place every time you go. Maybe it changes by the season or the time of day, or surprises and delights you every trip that, maybe one day you're going to go to the shopping mall just to see what's new there. And, building all that on top of the infrastructure that we've already built. Our malls are enclosed, so, that gives you some tremendous opportunities to really provide, different services and to really treat the shopper and the tenant differently than they would be if you were in an outdoor mall where you don't have control over a lot of those things. And all of that is built on that original infrastructure that we put together. And, to give you an idea, when we put in the original energy management, we connected up to about 100,000 points. Keep in mind we have about 20 malls at the time. Connected up 100,000 points using a combination of BACnet and TCP/IP to a single console centralized at headquarters that allows us to view in real time the energy consumption, the building performance, the performance of all of the individual units. And it allows us, as anyone who manages energy knows, your billing rate is determined by your peak energy usage in many markets. And this allows us in real time to be able to see when we're approaching one of those limits and then be able to, take actions either manually or autonomously to make sure that we don't set a new peak and to help us manage those peaks down. I mean, just simple things like previously we used to turn on all the lights in the parking lot at once, and bam, that would generate this big peak. Now we can do it, turn on these lights, 5 minutes later turn on that set, and that set. And so it gives you tremendous flexibility and real-time visibility of what's going on. And, we've taken good full advantage. And I'll say that, our original ambition was to have energy pay for all of this. Well, it easily pays for it every year. And then as we're starting to bring on some of the new streams of revenue, they're also paying for it every year. So it's ended up being a tremendous benefit for us from that perspective. And I also mentioned how it's sort of setting us up for the future. So I included, just a quick use case. One of the examples that we use when we talk about, well, where's the future of all this going? And, why, how does this extend, beyond just sort of all the typical building automation? And so, one of the use cases we're talking about is autonomous parking. And to give you a little perspective on this, there are car manufacturers that are saying they will have an autonomous valet capability by the year 2018. And boy, that's really far off in the future now, isn't it? And I can tell you from talking to both OEMs, the car manufacturers and car suppliers, on some vehicles that's going to be a reality next year. So in this example, how we view the impact of autonomous vehicles on our properties is one of the biggest roadblocks to coming to visit the mall is when people think, especially at holiday, someone's thinking about going out to the shopping center, and the first thing they think about is, oh man, the traffic and the parking and oh man, what a, it's just not going to be a pleasant experience. So, what we're planning is to be able to put in advanced parking systems, have those parking systems talk to the cars and create a whole new experience for the shopper. They pull up to the mall, they get out, the car talks to the parking system, and the parking system, maybe it sends it a little map of the mall parking lot and shows them where the autonomous vehicles are assigned to park. There's a lot of reasons why you don't want them just parking where there are people walking around and you also don't want them grabbing the closest space to the mall because that's where you want your actual people who are driving their cars to park. And the shopper goes in, the car goes, finds a spot that's been assigned to it. When the shopper is done, notice the full bags, they summon the car to wherever they happen to be. It doesn't have to necessarily be the same entrance they came in. It could just be wherever they are. And the car comes by, picks them off, and off they go. So we've been able to really take out one of the big obstacles to even going to the shopping mall, which is just, getting there, finding a parking spot, hassling with finding your car when you're done, all using IoT. And this is a sort of an interesting example, but I can tell you right now we are working to make this reality, talking to, OEMs, talking to auto suppliers, as well as parking system vendors, and really trying to bring this vision to reality. And that's just one example of the sorts of things that having a flexible, fully connected, state-of-the-art infrastructure will allow us to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That's fantastic. A couple things, if I could ask one maybe provocative question, but first I just want to tell everybody out there that the questions coming in are fantastic, and we're staying right on schedule so we can get to everybody. And again, we promise we will either get to them in our panel session at the end, or I or others can reply back to you afterwards. But Michael, not to be provocative, but when you talk about the IoT, autonomous cars, and all these kind of things, is that an attempt to counter the disruption caused by e-commerce? I mean, how is IoT, or is it, helping you with what seems to be a big problem for you?
Well, so I think there's a number of things we're doing. I mentioned a little bit about being able to provide state-of-the-art, high-speed bandwidth to tenants at costs that are much lower than what they would get on the open market. So just giving them the connectivity in their stores so that they can do things like magic fitting room mirrors and mobile iPads for their assistants and streaming video and all those kind of things to make the store experience more engaging and exciting. In addition, things like reducing the barriers to shopping and giving people making people more productive while they're in the shopping center, so that while you're, for example, instead of just sitting around outside of Cheesecake Factory waiting for your table to be ready in 2 hours, they can actually be off shopping and be notified, hey, 10 minutes before your table's done, we see you're all the way down at Macy's. If you start walking now, when you get here, your table will be ready. So really using this whole infrastructure to maximize the productivity of their trips while they're here, engage them with things like offers that are related to why they're there today, just being able to engage them and excite them in new ways. And like I said, one of the ideal things would be every time you show up, there's something different, whether, maybe it's a new art exhibit, maybe it's, some new interactive thing that we're doing, or even entertainment, fashion shows, et cetera, and using IoT and technology to enable, all of these things, make the mall a different place every time you come.
That makes perfect sense. I appreciate that. So that'll conclude the real estate guys section of this, and now we're going to move into some of the tools and ways that we would do this, and particularly excited to start with Vlad Roth, who's the co-founder and president of Lucid. Vlad led Lucid's early product and engineering teams and has driven an evolution of the company from its inception in 2004. Received awards from EPA, Cleantech Open, and others. He has dozens of publications and delivered many presentations, including TEDx. And he helped pioneer groundbreaking research in commercial building monitoring systems and real-time feedback technology. And I also know that he talks a lot about data and big data, which I am looking forward to hearing all these things and the Internet of Things got to be pushing out a lot of data. So, Vlad, go right ahead.
Appreciate it, Tom. Thank you. I think I want to pick off on a couple of pieces that Michael and Scott both mentioned, which is that the way they look at IoT infrastructure and smart building technology is really the gift that keeps on giving. And I think that's especially true as we're entering what I see as the next stage of evolution in commercial building technology, which is sort of the software side of the equation, the analytics side of the equation. I think we've spent really the last decades as an industry layering and adding a lot of infrastructure that supports these kinds of concepts, that supports these kinds of ideas that really will enable us to move to a data-driven future. And where a lot of organizations sit today is they're basically saying, okay, now we have the infrastructure, what do we do to make it valuable? What do we make to unlock all this derivative value that we all know is there? And we have a lot of experience working with a lot of organizations, some that are just getting started with their IoT journey, some that are very, very advanced and very far along in their sophistication, their journey, and how they've adopted and operationalized data-driven technologies. And I think what's true across the board, and this represents probably about 550 individual portfolios across the U.S. and worldwide, is that most organizations aren't capturing all the data they could, and oftentimes there's a lot of stranded data assets. There's a lot of technologies, a lot of utility bills, a lot of smart meter data that's just sitting out there. And even if you don't think you have building IoT infrastructure in place today, think again, because you do. And focus on unifying it and centralizing it and making it very simple to utilize, and whether it's energy management, whether it's in engaging your tenants, whether it's on making the right capital decision or management decisions. And if we look at sort of how other industries use data, it's not very difficult to immediately think of Tesla, where a $60,000 vehicle is instrumented in and out, and there's data flowing back to the mothership every single second on the operations, on the braking, on the faults in the system, on the efficiency of different drivers and their driving behavior. And if we look at commercial real estate, the state of the art is still very manual for a lot of organizations. I think, we're fortunate to have a great panel today of folks that are doing a lot with data and a lot of IoT. But if you look at the majority of commercial buildings in the U.S., the state of the art is very much a manual process. Facility managers still spend an inordinate amount of time entering bills, trying to create budgets, trying to do their reporting, worrying about how they automate their compliance because it's taking it too many cycles. They're sitting on a lot of infrastructure. They have BMS systems. They have incredible capabilities, but they're not being able to take full advantage of those because they lacked operational visibility. And frankly, working with data is still a little bit hard. I think we've had a race to go and deploy infrastructure, and that's a great thing because it enables what we're going to do next. And I think we saw a number of examples from Scott, for example, on the various dashboards they put together and the metrics. And that's a great process to go through. A lot of organizations go through that as they become more sophisticated in how they use data for their operations. But the challenge is that everything has been sort of one-off. Every organization has been trying to reinvent the wheel from scratch of how they put data to use. And that's really what we're really focused on changing and making easier, is making it easier to use data, making it easier to unify it and put it to business use, and also streamlining the business process of energy management, of sustainability management, of tenant management and building operations. Because it's not practical for all of us to want to go and develop and deploy Oracle scale systems and Oracle complexity systems. What this industry really needs is a Salesforce type, lightweight, easy to deploy, quick time to value, I want to plug in my data and get going kind of solution. Because this is an industry that's very fragmented for good reasons. There's a lot of legacy infrastructure. We don't rip and replace building technology every day. There's many, many vendors, and that's a good thing because that means that the cost of hardware technologies, the cost of infrastructure has come down, and a lot of great new capabilities have hit the market. But that means that the building owner and operator is left with the challenging task of going in and connecting the dots. And connecting the dots, I think we already heard, is really step one. A lot of organizations have been focused on how do I go and unify all these systems? How do I get them on a consistent infrastructure? And sort of the next step above that is saying, well, what about other types of data, not just the building systems, but what about the utility invoices and the utility rate and tariff structures that I'm on that really are my cost drivers at the end of the day? What about the data from my tenant management system, which is really critical, or from my asset management system, or how much am I spending on labor? All those things need to be unified so that you can really unlock the true value of data. And I think the next 5 years are really all about that. And many organizations have already done that unification step and are now beginning to use it effectively to go and improve their operations and fundamentally drive action. And driving action requires collaboration across teams, not just the building engineers, but the tenants, the sustainability practitioners, the finance team who ultimately approves the budgets, and fundamentally the building owner, whether that's an investor or whether that's a sole company that owns and operates and oftentimes occupies the facility. So whatever you do, and I want to make sure that that point is sent across, is it has to be simple, because building technology has the challenge of being very, very complex, again, for good reasons, but building technology is very complex. The data we work with is complex, and the use cases are not simple. So if you can go and simplify it and people are going to adopt and use this kind of technologies much, much faster. There's a number of examples that I'm excited to walk you guys through and show you how some of the customers that we work with have done that step. And when you simplify things and when you make them accessible, suddenly an organization begins to operationalize data-driven technologies very fast and showing value and success very, very quickly. And that's what we want. We want lightweight, repeatable, quick time to value in an industry where everything has been complex and sort of very long cycles to get from point A to point B. And so I've got 3 examples I'll bring up today. One is with McKesson. For those of you who are not familiar with McKesson, they're a Fortune 15 global distribution company in the healthcare space, and they manage over 1,200 facilities across 6 different business units, so a very large, very complex portfolio. And their focus out of the gate was really, let's go and unify all the systems to step one. So their Senior Vice President of Global Real Estate and their Director of Global Facilities collaborated to roll out an enterprise facilities management system that accomplishes a couple critical objectives. One is data unification for all their critical operation systems, but for them it had to be easy. It had to be utilized by multiple teams, and it had to be something that really replaced what was a lot of manual steps with fully automated data gathering, fully automated utility bill invoice collection. They wanted the system to be fully future-proof because they knew that they would keep layering next-generation technologies as they go, and the integrations would change as buildings are upgraded. And so future-proofing a solution and abstracting sort of the infrastructure layer from the software layer was a very important step for them. And they also had to have it portfolio-wide. This couldn't be about going and optimizing one single building on one single campus. This had to be a portfolio-wide effort, or it wasn't going to be effective and worth their while. And so they focused on making sure that once they have the data centralized, they really focused on what are the KPIs for the business, and those may evolve, but what are the KPIs for this year, and can we get visibility so that everyone up and down the chain can understand them, get access to them, and there's no excuses why you can't really look at the KPIs and make sure you drive the buildings there and raise your hand if you're not going to get there. They also were really focused on sort of not going down the path of death by analytics, because they were saying, look, we're not using data effectively yet across all our buildings, so we don't want to go immediately to deep system-level device analytics. We're going to start whole building, and there's a law that you can do 80% of the value can really be done at the whole building metering level, and they even use smart meter data. So for those of you who say, we don't have sub-metering, we don't have real-time data infrastructure, you probably have a utility bill you definitely have a utility bill, and you probably have a smart meter, and you can get that data from your utility. So that's what McKesson did, and when they did that, they were able to do a whole bunch of very interesting things. For example, one of their buildings, they found that the fans were running on weekends, so the weekend schedule in the BMS system had drifted and wasn't correctly addressed. That one measure saved them $12,000 a year for the one building. And so all in all, the first phase of this, they said, okay, let's bite off 200 buildings. Let's deploy this kind of technology with smart meter data, with utility bill data. Let's demonstrate the value quickly, which they did. They also fully operationalized the carbon reporting and a sustainability process. And then let's go expand, and as we layer and connect more infrastructure over time. So they've made a tremendous amount of progress in very, very short time, and it's amazing to see when you make things simple just how fast your team adopts this kind of technology, which I think is the single biggest challenge that a lot of organizations face is adoption of these metrics if you make them too complicated. The other example I want to talk about is a slightly different type of building and a slightly different type of customer. Avery Dennison is a global manufacturer, so if you guys look at the back of your shirt, the tag that's on it, chances are on your shirt and most of the clothes you own, the tag is made by Avery Dennison. And they have over 150 manufacturing facilities, employ a lot of people. Many of the facilities are overseas, so this is an interesting opportunity because the operations team and the management team is here, but the actual facilities that they're trying to manage are in China. And so cloud infrastructure and data that can flow very easily enable them to deliver some pretty impressive results, very impressive results on a portfolio that is spread pretty far geographically. And they actually went directly after the circuit level loads. Because it's a manufacturing facility and so much of it matters at the production line level, not so much at the building level, they actually needed to deploy the infrastructure that can connect to the circuit level. And again, they wanted a future-proof system that can support multiple different varieties of submetering hardware because they weren't sure what was going to scale, what was going to work. They wanted to try multiple submetering technologies in different buildings until they find the one they want to centralize on. And they also needed a system that can process, again, massive amounts of interval data and make sense of it very easily because they don't have a lot of cycles to spend on this. They wanted the software to do the heavy lifting. And the goals were not just identify the opportunities, but also show the financial ROI. They wanted to know financial bottom line, not kilowatt hour bottom line, but financial bottom line. How do these projects perform? And so they set out to go and connect again, all the operational metrics and map them to how they believe the systems should function, and started using the systems on a daily and a weekly basis, and did some pretty impressive things very, very quickly. They, all in all, identified over $1 million worth of savings from a $5 million energy budget for the subset of buildings that were focused on. And so that in and of itself attributed to something close to about a 30% reduction in carbon. One of their primary goals from the start was they had a very aggressive goal to reduce carbon emissions by 2025. And so that was a key driver for them. And they discovered a lot of the opportunities sort of the first half of 2016, and through the end of the year, they had implemented and operationalized 21% annual energy savings, which is a staggering number. It's about, in total, they saved 9 megawatt hours of power. That's they can power about 800 homes, and it was a collection of things.
Just another minute or so, if you can.
Yeah, and that was a collection of both operational and capital improvements. And the last one, which doesn't really need an introduction, I think we all obsessively use LinkedIn. That's a customer that was probably one of the most security conscious customers that we worked with from the start. And they have been committed to sustainable and efficient growth when it comes to their building operations. And the way they've grown their portfolio has really been both through acquiring existing buildings and building some new ones. The interesting thesis here is that when they connected all the various systems in both legacy and new, the fundamental question they were trying to answer was, are buildings good or are they bad? Are they efficient or are they inefficient before we start focusing efforts? And in collaboration with the Department of Energy, you know, when we talk about big data, every building is slightly different and slightly special. We were able to use a very large data set through our collaboration with DOE to compare and benchmark LinkedIn's buildings and identify how they should be performing versus how they are performing. And so that's now become a key benchmark. And the other effort underway was really on a new building which was designed to be net zero, and immediately after it went into operation, it was clear that it wasn't going to be net zero. And panel level submetering uncovered that while the lighting systems were working as designed, and while the HVAC systems were scheduled as designed, they had a faulty HVAC unit. They had to be replaced, and they also had 2 to 3x the plug load use, which was driven by a lot of individual servers that different developers were setting up. And so there's now public dashboards in some of these buildings that are showing the actual occupants how they're contributing to the building actually hitting the net zero target. And so it's a team effort. It's not just the energy managers, but it's also the occupants. So those are really kind of key examples of you don't need a tremendous amount of data to uncover those insights. It's all about making the actions easy, simple, and accessible to as broad of a group as you can.
Super. Thank you, Vladi. And I got a question, but I'm gonna switch that around to the panel session at the end. It's about IoT infrastructure, and so if you give that some thought, I'd be wondering how you even get started with that. But I'm gonna have to jump over to Steve Nguyen, VP of Product and Marketing at Building IQ, and Steve leads product marketing at Building IQ to bring a suite of cloud-based energy intelligence service to the commercial, healthcare, education, and other building markets. And he has experience in utility customer engagement software and corporate marketing with Echelon, which some say was a pioneer in IoT. And he introduced the world's first one-to-one motion tracking controller for 3D VR. So Steve, why don't you go right ahead.
And Steve, I'm sorry, we're having some technical difficulties hearing you.
Sorry about that. I think I'm back.
There we go.
Again, thank you everyone for coming. I wanted to just give our kind of philosophy around the building IoT. And when it comes to the building space, it's very different from some other IoT spaces or markets like homes, for instance. And that is because the building itself typically has a resident network, especially if you're talking about the large building space. And that resident network is, in point of fact, an IoT network. It's just not kind of used in the way we think of IoT today. So if you look at a Johnson Controls or Honeywell type system that's in place, it's got a lot of intelligence built into the system. And our philosophy is basically, why not take advantage of that? So in building a building IoT, we're adding cloud intelligence on top of an already intelligent cooperative sensor and actuator network, which is the BMS. And in our case, what we tend to focus on is the heating, venting, and air conditioning system, because that is in most instances the primary energy driver in a commercial building. So if we look at the building IoT space and we look at the realities of the commercial building space, we really think of a building IoT solution in 5 pillars. One is to collect as much data as possible. And again, the beauty of working in the building space is there's a tremendous sensor network already in place, and of course you can extend that. The second thing is to model the physical environment, because these large spaces are gigantic thermal batteries. They gain and lose heat at a specific rate, depending on how they're constructed and what types of physical energy measures they have in place, like triple pane windows and so on and so forth. But they also have occupancy patterns that are unique to the client, occupancy density, occupancy flow, different portions of the building react differently to weather conditions between the temperature, the wind, and the humidity, and the direction, the incidence of the sun, and so on and so forth. And there's also this animal in there, which is the BMS itself. And the BMS is somewhat unique because the BMS is now actually interacting with and controlling the physical environment, and there's a huge amount of variables in place. So it's very important to understand how that specific implementation of that BMS interfaces with that unique physical environment. We call that a control potential model. And as we move around this circle, our company takes those models and we build a predictive analytics engine. We use that engine to say what is going to happen in that building under certain conditions. So we embed this whole idea of measuring and verifying actions within the building, and we take the ultimate step, which is control. And taking these first 4 segments, we create this recurring vicious circle, if you will, of pulling in data, modeling and predicting what's going to happen, building in measurement, and then controlling, and then measuring the impacts of that control. And based on that, we remodel, reanalyze the data, adjust our measurements, and recontrol. And if you think of it that way, what we're doing is we're taking a cloud-based control infrastructure, applying it to a smart network, and basically tuning 24/7 the behavior of that building, whether it's being tuned for pure energy reduction or a perfect balance between comfort and energy. And the last component, or last pillar, is the human capital. And we mustn't forget that within a commercial building environment, no matter how sophisticated the IoT, there are still people on the ground that operate the building. And those people have a tremendous amount of intellectual capital. And yet they're heavily constrained. They don't have the resources to go do the work. They may not have the skills to analyze big data, and they may not even have the will to do it. But they're very, very crucial to the operating of that building, not only in terms of its just pure operations, but in terms of its marketability. A well-run building is a building that's attractive to tenants, in other words. So we augment that human capital with our own human capital, and we do the first line of defense, if you will, taking a pure analysis and moving on to diagnosis. So that, in our mind, is a complete, better and better building IoT solution. So very simply, from a communications framework, our version of a building IoT solution actually starts with the BMS that's resident. It's segregated from other systems, life safety systems and data systems within the building. And we can add to that IoT devices, whether they are segregated meshes or individual devices. And then it pushes up into the cloud, and that's where we do all that heavy lifting. And then it goes back into the building, and the building system takes over at that point. So we are augmenting the capabilities of the building system with predictive analytics, which translates into predictive control, because we're telling the building what to do based on the upcoming weather and cost and parameters such as comfort, measuring it, and then redoing it again, and we do that 24/7. So that secure communications infrastructure creates a completely closed control loop that allows the optimization of both energy consumption and the delivery of constant comfort to the tenants. I don't want to spend much time on the products, but just look at it this way. When dealing with a commercial building entity, there's a lot of legacy BMS knowledge and a lot of legacy BMS emotion. But what we're really trying to do is help clients in the commercial space sort of understand what's going on with their energy. And then we take that first task at analyzing and tuning, help them act, and then automate that ultimately. And we do that through a series of products that are deployed across our portfolio. And the net of that is a nice balance between energy, comfort, and operational efficiency. And that is really the key to a sustained value in a commercial entity, is to be able to deliver consistent, repeatable, predictable energy savings to ensure comfort amongst the tenants and to optimize operations so there's no kind of operational waste occurring in the building. And you can do that when you're looking at energy, to Vlad's point. Once you understand what's going on with the energy and the ebb and flow within the energy within the building or within a portfolio, you can begin to identify with great accuracy operational deficiencies and improvements. So when we're looking at an IoT style solution, especially in an existing built environment, the reality is that building stock is all over the map, from pure pneumatic controls to pneumatic plus VDC to finely tuned Johnson Controls or Honeywell type systems. And customers today, because of interoperability issues in the past, and I will claim some responsibility for that from my work at Echelon, the tenants are tired of all that kind of stuff, and what they want is a solution that sits on top of any system. Again, to points made earlier, portfolio holders and large real estate firms are looking for one system, sits on top of the existing infrastructure, and can absorb new infrastructure into one energy management solution. And the part that we do that's different from others, and I think what building owners really appreciate, is to take that extra last step of control. So to not only provide the data analytics, to not only provide some diagnosis, but then also to be able to do the fine-grained control that takes that out of the sequencing of the BMS itself and adds a very, very sophisticated level of sequencing that's forward-looking for the weather conditions and forward-looking for the price. And that kind of combination from visualization all the way through this fine-grained control addresses everything in a portfolio under one energy management system. So in terms of the case studies I'd like to briefly touch on, the first one is a public school. The example is really not that we did work there, but the fact that it was a LEED Gold certified facility that in 2 short years had doubled its energy intensity. So here's a fantastic building, LEED Gold certified, and yet the reality of running a building meant that within 2 years they doubled their energy intensity. So we went in and did an energy analysis, didn't do any of the control, and identified some anomalies in the operations of their system, such as simultaneous heating and cooling to maintain a particular set point. Now they were comfortable, so they didn't look at that. But when you look at the energy trace, you can see how much energy they were wasting. Another good example is 200 I Street in Washington, D.C. In this particular system, which is a Siemens system, we went in and looked at that system, and it began to identify just within the HVAC system about 15% savings, which translated to about 9% of their overall building use, which translated to about 90K savings. As we look through other areas where we've done some work, this next case study is Waterfront East in Washington, D.C. What's interesting about that is over and over you hear from an energy management perspective that my building is well run. And then you go in and it's, in fact, not well run. This particular building was quite well run, admittedly, and the client basically says you're really not going to be able to improve what we do because we run our BMS well. But they handed it to us anyway, and what we were able to do was achieve about 9% HVAC savings and about 4.5% energy savings overall. The last one I'd like to talk to is St. Vincent's Hospital down in Sydney. It's a very large hospital, series of hospitals in Sydney. We have a number of their campuses, and their whole thing was really peak avoidance. And in that case, having a highly flexible system that works across multiple BMSs was essential because A, it had to be flexible enough to avoid all the patient care areas, tunable enough so that it didn't have some unintended consequences as you manipulated the air environment in portions of the building that you were controlling, and yet they had a tremendous amount of pressure to save energy, particularly at peak. So we were able to achieve 1.7 million kilowatt hours of savings over a 14-month period, and as you can see, a 10% reduction in demand. So again, to earlier points, once you're looking at energy, you want to create kind of actionable insights. So whether or not you do control, once you start analyzing energy and looking at it at a systemic level, you can begin to see variances in the energy profiles. And those variances, depending on which data points you look at, can lead to a diagnosis. And so there's something that we call outcome-based fault detection. So we're taking advantage again of the existing BMS/IoT infrastructure, but now we're looking at it purely as a set of data. So we're, in essence, decontextualizing the data, looking at it as a pure data stream and beginning to look for anomalies. And then we go in the reverse. Once we find an anomaly, we begin to contextualize that anomaly to understand what's going on. And the net result of that is a diagnosis. And the beauty of that from a building owner's perspective is we're leveraging the system that's in place. We're leveraging their investment in human capital with the facility team, and we're augmenting their capabilities to deliver, at the end of the day, an operational and an energy savings, which translate, if you combine the two, into an outcome that guarantees comfort. And the last thing I'd like to leave you with is the notion of how we move forward. As I said, we are already building thermal models for every building. We're building controlled potential models for building. We're modeling weather. And then now we're beginning to model comfort. So not just am I hot or am I cold, or I'm warm, therefore turn on air and begin to condition my space. We're actually looking at how humans interact with the physical space and how that physical space interacts with them. So what are the conditions that make a person comfortable? What makes them uncomfortable? Whether it's a sun condition, airflow condition, temperature condition, air quality condition, or what have you. That model will become a part of kind of the intellectual property or intellectual capacity of a building, and that's a data area and a modeling area where we think there's a lot of future development to do, and we're on that path. But I think in general, as the IoT space evolves, we'll begin to look at kind of behavioral models around the interaction between the physical environment and the ultimate sensor, which is in point of fact a human. And I'd like to just leave you with that thought, and thank you very much.
Steve, thank you. That was very helpful. And while we're switching over here, I'll go ahead and introduce Srini Kandapalli, who's with Intel. And a brief introduction should say it all. Srini currently owns the strategy, roadmap, and implementation of IoT smart buildings at Intel, where he's been for 18 years. So Srini, I'll let you take it over with that.
Okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
You bet. All
right. Excellent. So I've enjoyed this presentation up till now because there are a lot of common themes emerging for the audience, right? And, I was just writing them down. I think the importance of data, the importance of building an extensible system, the building IQ, Stephen talked about, a system approach. And finally, the importance of employee comfort, right? So these are some of the common themes that will also repeat in my presentation. I'm going to be talking about the SR3 building today. It's Intel's first IoT smart building implementation worldwide. I was with this project since inception. It's been a 2-year journey, wonderful journey. You see the building in the background there. Now, we just have 10 minutes to discuss this, but there's a white paper that I put out on this subject that kind of captures the journey from a perspective of life cycle and technical architecture. I'd love if you guys go through that. Questions, comments, ideas, feedback would be wonderful. Okay, so let's get started here, and I'll jump into the project background. So really quick, the SR3 building was a 10-story, 630,000 square foot building. In Bangalore, it's a greenfield deployment. It had 9,000 sensors that track the various parameters that are shown here. Majority of these sensors were in a digital ceiling. One of the attributes we talked about, CRE 5.0, was IP-centric. This lighting solution is a PoE-based lighting solution, addressable, right? So we are moving in that direction. And I call this an IoT-based solution, given the fact that I think it has 3 key attributes which makes it IoT-based. The first one is that it has a capability to ingest messages that are not just common on with BMSs, that is, let's say Modbus or BACnet, but we're able to ingest messages that are coming in on Zigbee, REST APIs, et cetera, right? So that's the first aspect, because we have many more sensors than a traditional building. Now, this additional data, the second attribute, I believe, of a good IoT-based system is it has advanced rules and analytics outside what you would typically do in a building. And finally, these rules essentially will drive intelligent actions back into the building. And the last aspect is the fact that it is a cloud-based solution. When I say cloud-based, I don't mean outside our intranet, but it's sitting in a space, it's essentially available through a URL for anyone to view our current, how we're doing on our current metrics. And I think this is a very key point, because this data transparency ultimately, I believe, will lead to better decision-making with regards to your real estate portfolio. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. And the next 2 slides, I'm going to talk about things that I believe people should do early on in the life cycle. The first one is the establishment of business goals. And on the SR3 project, we took 3 business goals. First was to reduce resource usage, specifically energy and water. Second was to improve OpEx efficiency, both for assets and the maintenance of facilities. And finally, it was to increase occupant comfort. And I can't stress this point enough, but I think when you start on this journey, take a look at the use cases, take a look at the total sum of your use cases, and you should have some use cases that are focusing on this particular vector. The studies have shown that efforts in this space will lead to a multitude of benefit, multiple of benefit over anything you can do in the energy conservation area or even with OpEx. Well, so this is at a high level the start of your journey, but you need a little bit more granular information in form of metrics, right? So the metrics essentially help you with articulating what success looks like. And we had numerous KPIs. I've shown you a sampling of the KPIs we have that we're tracking here: energy consumption, operational expense, and facilities. And we want to reduce the dollars we spend in these areas. So we have essentially a goal state, and we are also tracking actuals that we are tracking too. We also have metrics around service ticket volume, again, going back to the concept that employee satisfaction is very key for us, and this is one of the parameters by which we're judging that. Okay, so now let's transition a little bit into use cases. And on the SR3 building, we had a total of 40 use cases that we implemented. The specific use case I'm going to be talking about is to do with analytics, and it's to improve employee comfort. And the challenge that we observed in most buildings is there's a lot of temperature variation that happens through the day. And the solution we built out for this was a machine learning algorithm that predicts appropriate set points for the HVAC. Delving a little bit deeper, essentially how a machine learning algorithm works is it's a polynomial regression. And what that means is you're solving for the independent variable, in our case, the HVAC set point, based on numerous dependent variables. In our case, we've taken indoor temp, occupancy, and the external temp. So this is what we've done here is essentially made the predictions much more granular and more predictive in nature. So when occupancy changes, the set points for the HVAC will instantaneously change. Now, this machine learning algorithm needs to learn, and that course will be about 6 to 8 months. But we believe that once fully implemented, once we have that set defined, we will have a much better employee comfort. Now, there are various other parameters that we can add to this machine learning algorithm, like what do the occupants actually want the temperature to be. So this is a journey. So we've implemented phase 1. We're looking at phase 2. But I wanted to bring out this specific use case because it's focused on analytics, typically not what you would have in a BMS, and it's also based on data that's outside the building and where we're proactively measuring that in order to drive, the HVAC set points. Let's transition a little bit to technology architecture. And I want to start off by defining what I mean by edge. And for me, the edge is the Intel IoT-based gateway that's at the center of the diagram here. What this IoT-based gateway, the Intel IoT-based gateway enables you to do is ingest messages on multiple protocols, and you see that on the left. And it's also extensible where if you have new protocols, it's you can essentially add that capability to the gateway. So that's the first point. The second point, we've talked a little bit about cyber, the importance of security. So a lot of those features are bundled into the gateway with the capability of McAfee. So we have the capability to only let the apps that we determine are on a whitelist run. We have the capability to ensure that the OS is in a known good state when it's booting up. We can encrypt applications running on the gateway. And finally, it also plays the role of provisioning. And a lot of these features are bundled with the standard Intel IoT-based gateway, where it helps you with provisioning all the gateways in your building with just one touch, where you have to set up a server URL, and it will automatically pull down and keep your gateways in a known good state. Now, that's the Intel piece of it, but you can also extend the capability that comes out of the box with the gateway. And what I mean here is the system-of-system approach. You might hear this, you've heard this with previous presenters, but essentially a system-of-system is the rules, the workflow, and the analytics that sit on top of on-prem VMS. And we did that in this particular case. We took some vendor software. We implemented a portion of that we deemed important to run specific rules immediately on the gateway. And the data that we perceived that could be analyzed at a later date, we pushed to the cloud. Ultimately, the result of these rules and these analytics are intelligent actions that you actuate back to the on-prem VMS. So this, in a nutshell, gives you a view of the system architecture we implemented on the SR3 building. Again, you can download the case study at the URL below. I'll round out the discussion with results. We've had, in the limited time that we've seen this implementation, we went live in November of 2016. Just off energy consumption, we took a goal of 40%. We're tracking to 38% less energy consumed. And so we're well on track to hit the mark that I stated there of $645,000 per year. Again, like I said, we had about 40 use cases, and the OpEx efficiency is driven by multiple use cases in that domain. One of them is a mobile queue booking application that has been deployed, and it increases the employee capacity by 30% and gives you the capability to effectively only maintain the queues that are actually occupied. And finally, we talked in detail about the specific use case around occupant comfort and machine learning algorithm. This is based off a study. The 83% is about from a U.S. government study. This citation is below. But essentially, if you can improve worker satisfaction, you're improving worker productivity. And again, that's a wonderful goal to take. So with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Srini. That was fantastic, and we have heard about analytics and machine learning and big data, and I think with Todd with Cisco, we're going to get into some building guts now. And Todd is Cisco's industrial in Cisco's industrial product group, and he is developing the Internet of Things solution for digital buildings. So sounds like a good fit here. Todd, go right ahead.
You bet, you bet. Thanks, Tom. Well, since I am the last presenter, I'm going to kind of go through this so we can have some time for some questions. So we've covered a lot of what we've talked about of the advantages of digital buildings and what's going on within connecting things. I am going to try to get into the guts a little bit more of how we bring these things together and kind of maybe summarize a little bit of what we've seen today. So what we've talked about is that buildings of yesterday were siloed buildings with little or no data that were tended to be less than connected. And so what we've seen transition as part of this conversation today, that buildings are becoming a lot more complex, which are kind of driving a lot of factors. I mean, as we connect more things, we got more security risks. Because they're individual systems and they're intelligent, maybe they're not as optimized for cost. And so it looks like connecting all of these things and trying to get data shared amongst all of these systems tends to be more cost prohibitive than otherwise. And that's why we see about 30% of buildings with really intelligent systems and the rest of them with basic systems. And so we're really on the road to changing all of that. And you've heard that today from all of the presenters, which have done a great job. So where Cisco thinks or plays a role in this is what I heard from everybody on the conversation today is we're in this path to start to unify data and to try to bring as much things from a complex state into a simplistic state. And I think Cisco's perfectly positioned to do this. We've started to work with a lot of industry leaders, including some on this call. And we want to try to bring things together. And what we want to do is also provide the value of bringing them in together in a secured manner. So that is something that the industry is dying for. And as earlier presenters have mentioned, we don't want to move forward with adding more risk into the environment. You know, we want our names on the front page of the paper, but we want to in a positive fashion. So that's why we're kind of guiding the industry in the way to connect things properly and working with industry leaders on ensuring that they have the right technology integrated into their endpoints and other devices so that when you do connect them, it's easy to start to offer secured solutions right out of the box. And we're doing a lot of other work with validating the solutions that we're working with to ensure that you as operators and owners know how to put these things together and make sure that you're not creating more risk for yourself or anybody else. So what do you do? We're looking at all of this architecture and how it's coming together. For Cisco, the big part is that we not only see things getting connected, but we also see more and more things connecting to the network and also being powered by the network. So as others have talked about today, we're not only unifying the data, but we're also unifying the systems that they're connecting to. We don't want to see more portals created where we have to integrate that data. We want to get to a common platform so that we can connect the devices, potentially powering them, controlling them, and then also collecting the data from the systems. And we see the network as a key part to doing that. And there's a lot of reasons why the network is the right place to do that. We've talked about the way that the technology is changing, but it makes the security and the analytics of the systems much easier to do. So what I want to introduce as a case study today, and this is another way to think about how to really get started. We talked today about a lot of broad things, and people found value in certain things, and they went and they attacked those first. You've got to start with a basic use case or something that brings a value to your organization. In this particular case, I'm going to highlight some work that a developer in Fort Worth, Sinclair Holdings, did. And they have kind of taken this crawl, walk, run kind of approach. So for them, the driving factors were they needed to create a hospitality experience for their users. They create a lot of hotels with different chains, Marriott being a primary one, and then as a developer, they wanted more control over their projects. They wanted to make sure that the projects got done on time. They wanted to make sure that they were able to operate the facilities after they were done, and they wanted to make sure that they could add features as they went, as others have described today. And so they took this crawl, walk, run approach. The first thing was they wanted to get their hands on the technology. So I would encourage you all to go out, find the technology, work with partners on this call to get the technology, get your hands on it, and see what value it can bring to you. There's lots of value all the way from first in through operation and the customer experience. So I use those three buckets to really describe where we can kind of go as we start to implement this technology. And so they got their hands on the products. They train their people on how to start to work with these products. And then they said, well, we have a commercial office space. It makes perfect sense to start installing it here. We operate the building. We can start to take advantage of connected systems and all of the things the other speakers talked about today. So they went in and did an installation, which kind of drove them to the next phase. And now they're ready to really do the run approach. So they've created their model rooms for their hotels, and they've implemented this connected technology throughout the space. They've worked with all of their vendors to ensure that the products can be connected and that they can manage them through their systems. So now they're ready to run through the rest of their projects and start to bring all of these things together, providing a different experience for their users, providing the best operated facility, leaving room for them to add more services as things become available, even giving a way to compare possibly different hotel guests against each other as far as energy usage and other things like that, which can bring into a different way to connect with their customer. And so that was something that was really driving their work. And so they looked at their approach a couple ways, and what they said was, inside of office space and office buildings, we want to take an approach where we do everything in the risers and the IDFs, and we extend the technology out from the risers. So their IDFs and OT closets, where their electrical closets are, that model is changing a little bit for them on how they want to deploy, but essentially every system extending out from those closets becomes connected, and in most cases a low voltage DC type of environment. And then on the right-hand side, what they saw was in their hotel models, they could start to deploy more of a distributed model where they said, we're going to keep our main infrastructure in the closets, but just like we do with each one of our rooms, we have technology for the room, and we're going to deploy our equipment for that room closer to the systems that they're operating. So they looked at two different models, and they can be very flexible in the way that they want to do this. So with all of that, that's kind of how we see Cisco playing a role within these new smart connected digital buildings, and here's an example of how a customer has really moved forward and found value in doing so. So I appreciate your time today, and I really look forward to the questions here in the last 3 minutes. Tom?
Yeah, thank you for that, Todd. I appreciate that. And you know, Cisco's been in this space like we used to say about ourselves before it was cool. And now that the IoT is really moving things along, it's a good place to be. But let me ask you, speaking of that, then, are building codes having to change or changing? Is that creating change or an impediment, or what do you see about that?
Yeah, I think in the end, building codes can be interpreted regionally, so there's a lot of challenge regionally. At a national or a global level, we're working with leaders like Underwriters Lab and even the National Electrical Code to ensure that there are no obstacles for digital technologies, low power DC solutions. As an example, within Fort Worth, this particular developer has gone in front of the inspection boards because he wants to be able to close up his walls faster, and he's not installing AC solutions. So he's challenging them with new technology, saying, when I have in Texas, we have a emissions quality level that our automobiles need to meet. Well, if we bring in an electric car, we don't have a tailpipe to stick the emissions meter in to actually get our car certified. It's the same thing that's happening in buildings. The technology is changing, and the code needs to reflect that. So he's working on the regional laws regional codes to actually make that happen.
Gotcha, good. And I got a couple more questions, but just want to tell the audience again, we have a lot of fantastic questions, and we are going to answer all of them, even by email. And if you do not get a proactive answer, again, I'm happy to help coordinate Tom at intelligentbuildings.com. Vlad, as mentioned earlier, and we've just got a few seconds here, the IoT infrastructure is sort of a nebulous thing. Do you just have a quick comment for how, for the people on the call today, do they have one? Do they need one? Where do they even start with that idea?
I think a natural place to start, if you're wondering, is your utility bill. Every building has a utility bill by definition, and so by definition, you have IoT infrastructure because the utility has a meter strapped on the side of your building that sends data their way, one way or another, with varying resolutions. So that's where, and we see, frankly, government, which is just getting started, government organizations, that's the natural starting point for them, is saying let's use the insights to show value, and that gives us grounds to go and deploy more infrastructure that will give us more detailed, whether it's data or controls capabilities.
Gotcha. And one quick one to Srini. When it comes back to the cyber question, have you all had to delineate between the cyber and the control systems in the building versus things in the workspace and the enterprise?
Yeah, I think this is a function of your network topology, right? So we've taken a very conservative approach to that. So we, all those are on separate networks, and the IoT gateway essentially forms a bridge between the northbound systems, which is our the IGBN, our network, our corp network, and the sensor network. So by segregating this, we're effectively mitigating that risk for quite a bit.
Yep, thank you. And I've got to turn it over to Laura for some announcements here, but it sounds like today we talked a lot about what it is and what can be done, and it may be another webinar to talk about these ancillary issues around how to get the infrastructure started, what are the cyber issues, and we didn't even touch on a huge piece of it, which is the organizational impact of this and when all the IoT starts to blend departments. But I'm sure Laura's already got a note for that for another webinar. So Laura, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for joining us, and again to all of our presenters for their fantastic insight on this topic today, and for all of our sponsors who make this possible for us to produce these webinars. We thank you very much. And to everyone, please also be sure to join us for our next webinar, which is taking place on Thursday, March 9th, and the topic is Leasing Platforms and ERP Integration, a Status Report. You can register for that online at realcomm.com/webinars. And then also, coming up in June, please join us for our annual Realcomm IBCon conferences that are taking place in beautiful San Diego this year. This year's events will be packed with cutting-edge education sessions, an extensive vendor expo, networking opportunities, innovative building tours throughout the city, social events, and a lot more. So we'd love to have you join us for that event. And thank you again so much for joining us. The webinar today was recorded, so we will send the link out to everyone to be able to access that within about 24 hours. So again, thanks again for your interest and support in our community, and we hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks very much.